Let me get caught up on comments here, guys. Sorry. Ty says, awesome. $70,000 for a 10 by 10 space to promote Cooking Mama 27. I mean, that could be a little bit of the risk with a Reed Pop produced E3, right? And that is a lot of packs. The comment comment is insightful. Says, I'm not scarred by E3. No, not at all. Ty, you clearly have firsthand experience. Ricky says, I remember when E3 was called the Super Bowl for gaming. I mean, it was probably the most well-respected industry conference from a game announcement, game reveal standpoint. Again, because it's put on by the ESA, whose paying members are the game developers, right? That's their job, is to showcase game development, not hardware, not anything else, right? It's about game development. Matt says, E3 used to be the biggest expo out there. Now, after deciding to do in-person attendance for the first time since COVID, you turn to another company to organize the event. The ESA seems desperate. I mean, maybe they just realize that better left to a group that, whether we think PAX is unfocused or not, I think we can all agree it's been mostly a success the last, 5, 6, 7 years, whatever the time frame is. It's been well attended, COVID aside. Matt says, how the mighty have fallen. Yeah. Ty says, maybe I'm old and jaded, but I feel things like Nintendo Directs and Sony's PS showcases and all the other publishers that are just streaming annual press events are far cheaper and maybe more effective. What do you guys think of that? Should all the developers just be doing their own? First question. Second question, what does that mean for indie developers, who the ESA also represents, right? Does that leave them out of the picture?
I think there's a big advantage, especially to your point, to the indie developers and the smaller developers, for having it all be at one event. Because let's face it, unless you're a really, really hardcore, you're not following these Nintendo Directs or when Call of Duty comes out with a game, you're not following that. You'll see a TV ad or maybe you'll see a pop-up ad on your computer, but most people are not watching these events unless they're super hardcore. But if it's all at once, you get a big press blitz, you get articles written at mainstream, you get CNBC there. So the public at large kind of notices, which I think it helps smaller developers. If you're launching the next Grand Theft Auto, like GTA 6, yeah, everyone on earth is going to hear about that. But for the average game, the best way for them to get in front of the most consumers is to do it alongside of other games, because then everyone is watching. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just love that point so much, because I think about it all the time. Those of us who, all of us who work in the industry, right? You just don't realize how much information you consume on a day-to-day basis that the average person does not know any of it. And you're just oh my God, people don't know Overwatch is 5v5. And I'm guys, what? We've been playing it for 3 months now. It has to be 5. They just they don't know when the new Call of Duty comes out, right? They don't know that they're not going to have a new Call of Duty next year, right? There's all these things that just seem so obvious to us, because you literally see it on, based on who you follow on Twitter or whatever. And it's just yeah, I think you need an event that aggregates it. Otherwise, indie devs are just, no one's ever gonna know about it.
Yeah, the big splashy event is definitely, I think, benefits the indie developers in some ways more than the bigger companies who can, if they wanted to, market themselves quite effectively.
I actually want to add.
Jimmy, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add one perspective that I haven't heard yet, and I've been sitting on. Because we're talking about what the event does for the community, what it does for the game. What about what the event does for the sponsor? A lot of sponsors that fund these events want to have that in-person touch point with their audience. And I think as an industry, as its own mini ecosystem within the gaming community, these events do a massive service to our industry, because they get sponsors that might not otherwise put marketing dollars in esports, and they attract and acquire those sponsors and find a way to include them. So I really value the live events from that perspective. I will say, though, I'm not sure how I feel about a company that does so many large scale events for competitors, I don't know what to expect here, because I would also imagine that sponsor might be limited in where they want to spend, right? And so maybe they want to go to PAX and not E3. And then what do? Do you have that same network? Do you have that ability to attract those dollars and make it a success? They're certainly biting off a lot here by trying to do multiple events that seemingly, to Grant's point, don't necessarily have a lot of distinction between them. So I like this from hey, I like live events because it activates the community and it activates sponsorship dollars. I don't know how I feel yet if this management can replicate that success so many times over.
Yeah, but Jimmy, don't you love a good monopoly? Like, think about like what ReedPop's gonna be able to do, right? Like, hey, did you buy a booth at PAX East? Well, cool, you didn't. Like, well, you don't get one at E3. Did you buy a booth at E3? Well, you don't get one at PAX West, right? Like, look, I'm not saying they're gonna do that, and maybe it won't be as obvious, but it does give them so much leverage when it comes to talking to some of these people, and hopefully it just gets us better events at the end of the day. But
sure.
yeah, it could be a weird situation.
Great from a business standpoint for ReedPop.
Good for them, yeah.
All right. Hardware Barbecue says, yes, the out-of-season joke, Hardware Barbecue referring to the Diablo thing. That went well. Ricky says, right, people can just search new video game trailers, random month 2022, and get their fix. I mean, this is essentially the competition, right? Like, what's missing, and I think Grant touched on it, Jeff touched on it, is you don't get, the reporter from Forbes is not going to go and search out a game trailer, on YouTube to write about a new game coming out or a trend they're seeing, whereas they might if they're invited to an E3, right? Like, you don't get that mainstream industry coverage. Although I think Ricky makes a good point that for the end gamer, the end user, all these live events from a game announcement standpoint, even a Summer Games Fest, in my mind, is totally disintermediated by just throwing the videos up on YouTube, right? Like, if I want to go get the trailer for the new Call of Duty, I don't need to watch the 3-hour Summer Games Fest broadcast. I'll just go on YouTube and watch.
Of course, for Call of Duty that works, but how does it work if it's a game that you've never heard of? Like, no one goes and YouTube and say, hey, I'm looking for new game trailers this month. It's like, the whole point is you watch the show and it's like going to, it's like when you go to the movies and you see not that anyone goes to the movies anymore, but like, I used to love the trailers. Like, that was my favorite part. You get there, you think, I want to see that movie. I want to see that movie. I don't go online and be like, new movie trailers that are coming out. Like, it just, would you go to technically do that?
Would you go to the movie theater just to watch the trailers? Because that's what Summer Games Fest is. That's exactly what it is. It's as if you drive to the movie theater, sit down, they play you the trailers, and they're like, okay, no content, go home.
That's not actually entirely true, though, because there are some games that are then launched during Summer Game Fest, and there's some content that unlocks as the trailer plays.
Like,
I'm not saying you get a full movie, but you do get a little bit more than trailers.
True. Hamslot says, tinfoil warning. In my mind, PAX was more indie-focused, while E3 was more AAA. Do you think this move is trying to merge the two? That's an interesting tinfoil hat theory. Do you guys think that maybe eventually they merge the brands and you get just a fewer bigger shows? Anyone think that's a possibility? Lindsay?
I don't think ESA lets them.
I don't think. It's possible. PAX does have a location-based thing going, right? Like we talked about before. You have PAX East, you have PAX West, you had PAX South. They killed it. So maybe this merges with. Maybe they kill PAX West, and this becomes, the new PAX West, and they just call it E3. Like, that's possible. They just kind of consolidate things, but. I think for them, they're in the events business, so the more events they can run, the better. So I don't know if it's like 1 minus 1 equals 3. It's probably 1 minus 1 equals 0, right? Like, you don't get synergies by cutting events if you're in the events business. I don't think.
Ty says, let the past die, kill it if you have to. The E3 brand is valuable, right? I think in a lot of people's minds, it still has value, and a lot of people's minds, they'll still pay to go. And Ricky, I think, agrees here. E3 a dead horse. I can't imagine. Ty says, I I always looked at PAX as the big showcase for indie game developers. Yeah, I mean, but the problem is, I think Grant's original point was all the big AAA developers were also there, right? Like most of the PAX shows had Sony, had Take-Two, had like all the big publishers were also had a presence at PAX. But you're right, they did also showcase a lot of indie games. Matt says, I look up newest movie trailer releases on YouTube. Matt, thank you for backing me up on that. That's exactly how most people look up movie trailers.